Hello, everyone. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Susan. And today we're going to talk about the SCARF model and how it is a tool for understanding ourselves and others during change, especially rapid change.
So, speaking of rapid change, probably an understatement to say that the world feels upside down right now. So, why is that? And in particular, it, in the context of the SCARF model and what we're going to talk about today.
So I think you're right. I'm feeling it. I'm sure everybody's feeling like there's just no stability. There's no certainty. All of our structures, our operating structures, getting up, going to work, going out with friends, all the things that we're used to doing is just gone. And so that impacts us in a variety of ways. And so I think the SCARF model really helps us to understand what are those five domains that we may be feeling a little discomfort in, and what steps can we take to both increase our certainty and increase our comfort level, but also to help others do that as well.
So, I know you're going to get into what those specific domains are in the model in just a minute. You mentioned change. So, it's kind of a truism. Life has changed. The only thing in life that's certain is change. We know that. But what's the difference between just kind of say maybe normal change that we all deal with and this kind of rapid change that we're currently experiencing and the impact of that difference?
Sure. So we all go through changes regularly. I mean, nothing stays the same for very long. And a lot of those changes are subtle, so we don't necessarily notice them. We also may have big changes in our life that is an event, and then we get through it and we have a little time to sort of rest and recoup from it.
Hmm.
The difference between that and rapid change that we're experiencing now is that there are so many changes happening and so much information that's changing that we really feel sort of unstable, like we're walking across a high wire and just trying to keep our balance. And so that is the main difference. There's too many changes. They're all happening so quickly. There's not enough information, or the information is changing. And so I'm just not feeling like I know what direction to go. And I feel like I'm being bombarded with the next change, the next change. And so we might be feeling a lot of fatigue and anxiety and fear around what's happening around us.
So, a couple of things. One, then I'm hearing what you're saying is a key part of this is perception of what's happening, right?
Yes.
So, it's not just what's objectively happening in the world, it's really more about my perception and reaction to that.
Exactly. So our brains have one operating principle, and that is to survive. And in
Mhm.
order for us to survive, we have to be able to predict what's going to happen and have a certain sense of safety or certainty around events and outcomes. So we tend to gravitate towards those things that we believe will give us a reward or make us feel good, and we tend to avoid things that are a threat. And change is a threat, right? And this uncertainty feeling that we have is also giving our brain a threat signal. So it's really important that we find a way to navigate through this.
Okay, so then let's get into the model. And I suspect that one of the other aspects of uncertainty is not only do I not know what's going on around me, also probably don't have a great way to understand what I'm experiencing within me, which is where I think the SCARF model is really helpful because it kind of helps name some of the different elements. So maybe let's go into the SCARF. What does SCARF stand for and the relationship of these different elements?
Sure. And, our perception is our reality. So we don't necessarily have these things, but we have a sense of those things.
Mm,
We're constantly scanning our environment to see, how can we improve in any of these areas, and how can we avoid things that decrease these areas for us. So SCARF is the acronym that covers status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And this model was developed by David Rock in his neuroscience research. And it's based loosely on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if we look at that hierarchy and then we apply these domains to it, you can see some of the correlations.
mm,
So first of all, we're constantly scanning our environment to find out what is our value in relation to others. So
mm.
our status. And the challenge that we're all experiencing right now is that our status tends to be somewhat visual. So it might be the car we drive, the size of the office, where our office is located, our homes, all of those things help to contribute to our status, what we wear. And now that everybody or a lot of people are working from home, we're not having that visual cue as to what the status is. I mean, most of us are living in our dining rooms and communicating over Zoom meetings. And so you get a sense of status from that, but you don't get the same exposure to it that you would get in a face-to-face environment.
Right.
So some of us may feel that our status is decreasing during this time. Plus, we're probably not getting the same access to those high people we view as having a higher status than us as we would normally do.
Right.
And we may feel like we're being relegated to people with similar or lower status than us. And so, so that all contributes to that stress and anxiety as well. And status is a way that we survive, right? The higher the status we have, typically the better our ability to survive in the world. And the lower status we have, then we don't have the resources to be able to do that. And so you're seeing some of that in these social movements as well, is trying to get more equity in terms of status.
Right.
The second domain is certainty, and this is our ability to predict our outcomes. So you saw when, for example, the pandemic first came out, people were saying, well, it's like the flu, but it's not like the flu. And when the Black Lives Matter movement came out, it was, this is like the 60s, but not like the 60s. So
Right.
we need to have a sense of certainty to be able to feel comfortable taking an action. And our brains like to pattern match. So we like to say, this is like this, and try to give ourselves a sense of comfort around whatever that situation is, so
Right.
that we can feel comfortable making decisions and feeling confident. The higher level of uncertainty is ambiguity. And there's research out there that shows that in situations of ambiguity, we are likely to be just paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong decision.
Sure.
And so certainty becomes our friend and uncertainty becomes our friend, because we are more likely to make a decision that has an uncertain outcome than a decision that has an ambiguous outcome where we don't know what the outcome is, right? So that feels safer to us.
Right. Huh.
And we also like a little bit of certainty or a little bit of uncertainty, and we call that novelty. So having something that's a little bit different that is intriguing to us is important, but having as much as we're having right now is really creating some havoc in our brain.
Right. Makes sense.
The third domain is autonomy. And this is our sense of control over our own efforts. And so some of the changes that we may be making in our lives are driven by our own decisions, and some of those are being imposed on us. So you're seeing some resistance to those that are being imposed, like stay at home, wear a mask, those kinds of things are creating a decrease in our sense of autonomy. And so we're exercising our rights to do things to try to increase that sense of autonomy.
Right.
Relatedness is our sense of connection with others. And so for introverts like me, I'm sort of going, hey, I get to work from home. I get to see people online. That covers my entire sense of connection that I need. But others who are very extroverted are really struggling because they need to be in the same space with other people. Body language, as you mentioned earlier, and being able to read people's facial expressions is really important. And some people just are having a hard time doing that in a virtual environment. So feeling a sense of connection with others is important. And then fairness, this is our sense of justice, or that what is happening is fair. So you might have seen in previous situations in work where some groups were able to telecommute and that was seen as a benefit, and other groups weren't.
Right.
So their fairness meter kind of went down, and they said, well, why do they get to telecommute and we don't? Now you're seeing some fairness across the board, and where a lot more people are working virtually at all levels within an organization across multiple departments. And so you're seeing that equity level come up just a little bit. So those are just some ways that it might play out in our current environment.
Well, and then, so with this kind of underlying theme of balance and being on a highway, we're getting buffeted from multiple directions, one or two, but 5 or 10. And when you were talking about fairness, right? Fairness is very much a sense of balance. If things are out of kilter, then we respond to that. I'm wondering then about the relationship between the different pieces. So like It sounds like this also suggests ways that we either do or can compensate to stay balanced by understanding this model, and then how we can maybe increase certain things to compensate for other certain areas being lower. So maybe talk about that from the context, okay, how do we use this to kind of keep ourselves balanced or help those around us that we're working with stay balanced?
Great question, Tommy. And when we are experiencing change, all five of those domains are in threat response. So all of them, we're sensing a decrease. The way that you can get your balance back is to pick one or two that you can actually increase by making certain choices or decisions. For example, you may decide that now is the time to change your career, right? So that's taking a sense of autonomy and elevating that, and it's allowing you to then create some certainty of what is your life going to look like
Hmm.
in the next normal. You might be taking this opportunity to extend your relationship and enhance your relationship with your family, and reaching out to others using virtual means to connect with people you haven't spoken to recently. And so that allows you to increase your relatedness. So just by taking small actions and shifting your perspective and shifting your behavior a little bit, you can increase one or two of the domains, which helps to offset the loss you might be feeling in other domains where you might not have the ability to make an increase at this time.
Right. And this is things we can help do for others around us as well. It sounds like, if maybe they're not seeing this, but we can help create those. Because I'm thinking about like relatedness or certainty or some of those elements as well. Sounds like.
Right. And so you're seeing a lot of organizations that are doing virtual check-ins, virtual happy hours. They're really trying to schedule group virtual calls and events so that people do continue to feel connected, since you can't just walk down the hall and say hello to somebody. And I think that really understanding where you are on each of these domains and what you need to do, and then where other people are and what needs to happen for them, helps you just to be a little bit more both self and socially aware of how do I help others increase in those domains as well.
Wow, yeah, this really is very helpful. Any last comments or things that we want to be sure that we take out of this or understand?
Well, I just think that we all have the ability to make choices, and choices help us to increase our certainty and our sense of autonomy. And so I would really encourage people to make some small choices, things that you feel comfortable, relatively certain about.
Okay,
And that will help to increase and offset some of the deficits you might be feeling in some of these other areas.
that's great. Thank you very much. This is very helpful.
Thanks, Tommy.